Okay, so we're going to start with the first project, which is going to be the easiest project because it's only, there is no blending between different exposures, it's only one photo. So just a little note before we start. This is one raw file, which is this one, which was a nice sunset over Paris. If you look here in the metadata, you will see that I shot this photo at an aperture of 8.0 with a time of half a second at ISO 100. Now, let me comment this a little bit. The reason I shoot landscape usually between 8.0 and 11.0 is this gives me a big depth of field, meaning everything is in focus on the photo, especially if I focus on something which is in the middle of the scene. Here I focused on the tree, so I know pretty much everything was in focus. Another note is that if you look at it, the photo is very dark. And the reason the photo is very dark, and this is something that I do every time I take a sunset photo, is that I underexpose my photo. Because if I do that with a raw file and I underexpose it, I know I will get all the details of the sky, which is usually what's the nicest within the photo. And then I can just in camera raw get back all the informations. So let's see how we do this. Now, I always shoot raw file because raw file, a raw file is basically all the raw data from the sensor without any development, meaning there is no contrast, there is no saturation, there is nothing. It's just what the sensor saw, and it is up to you in camera raw to develop the photo. So what I do is I open it in camera raw by right-clicking on it, or by the way, I'm on Bridge. Bridge is this free sort of explorer or finder type of program that you find within Photoshop, and so I use Bridge. So right click, click open in camera raw opens. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I want to handle the exposure. Let's see if we can get some more information. Let's put in the fill light. Fill light is basically gonna, let's crack it up a bit, big time. Fill light basically is gonna reveal the shadow information. So that's pretty cool. This is what fill light does. The next thing we're gonna do is the temperature. This was a sunset, so I want it to be a bit warmer. So I'm gonna take the temperature and put it a bit to the right to make it a bit more sunny sunset type of photo. Then I'm gonna take the tint. If you put it to the left, you go into the greens. If you put it into the right, you get into like a more purple type photo. So I'm going to slightly put it a bit more purple, okay, to give it more like a sunset feel to it. Okay, so one thing you can also do if you want to get more information in the shadow is take the blacks and move them to 0. That's going to reveal a bit more what's hidden in the shadow. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost the contrast, because, well, it needs to be contrasted. It's not very nice so far. So we're starting to get there. Let's see before and after. Now, one problem we have with this is that the sky is way too blown out. The fact that we did the fill light to 87 has lightened up the entire photo, and I want to darken the sky. And this is where this incredible tool called the gradient filter, by pressing G or clicking on this icon, is coming very handy. What this does is that you can basically click and drag to put a little graduated filter here. Let me click here on minus exposure. If you click on any of these settings, they will all come down to 0 except the one you clicked on minus. So that's pretty cool. What I want to do is, this is basically I lower the exposure, and what it does is that it lowers it on a graded fashion, meaning here the minus 0.50 of exposure is at full force here, and then it goes graded down here. I need more. I want to get more of the sun. So you can also, basically what I do is I always move around the exposure and the brightness together, because this way I get a nice graded thing. You can see here before the graded filter, after the graded filter. Not so bad. Then let me boost the saturation to make it even more saturated, more vivid color. As always, as this is a graded action, basically what happens is that this saturation happens on a graded basis. So that's pretty cool. Now I find that the photo is too much purple. So let's go back by clicking, for example, on the hand tool to get back into the general settings, which are here. Let me get the tint back a little bit, because I think it's a bit too purple. See what happens, and maybe boost even further the yellow, the warmth to the right. Yeah, that's more like it. That's more the feeling I had when I was there. Okay, next I'm gonna boost even more the contrast to get the even more punchy photo. All right, it's not bad, but usually I like to tweak the exposure a bit more. And what I do for this is I go to the second tab of the Camera Raw software, and which is a tone curve. Here you have a curve which you can move around, but what I like is to use these settings: highlights, lights, darks, and shadows. Basically, I usually don't touch the highlights and the shadows, but what I can do is see what happens. You see, shadows is what's very, very dark in a photo. Darks is what is dark, not very dark, but dark. Light is what is light in a photo, but not very light, and highlights is what's very light. So let's see what happens if we lower the darks a little bit. Look at this. Starts to be pretty cool. Let's see if we can boost a bit the lights. Yeah, this adds sort of what I call the middle tone contrast. It creates like an S curve. Check it out, before and after. Oh, by the way, on Camera Raw, when you use the preview before and after, it only shows you the before and after of that tab, which is this curve. Okay, next, this was a very underexposed photo, so I really believe that there was a lot of noise into it. So let's check it out. Let's go here at 100 and let's take the hand tool to move in the shadows area. Check this out, lots of noise. So how do we take out noise? Well, we go into the third tab, which is the sharpening and the noise reduction. The way this works is you've got two types of noise reduction. You've got the luminance noise reduction, which is basically just grain, but grain without any color. And you've got the color noise, which is grain with reds and greens. You've got both of that going on in the photo. The way I do this is I take my luminance slider and put it to the right until I don't see any more grains. Okay, but no further. Okay, that's probably pretty cool. Now there is still a lot of color noise, so let's see what happens if we bring the color noise. All right, look at this. It kind of took everything out. Look, before, after noise reduction. Once I've done the noise reduction, I like to put back a bit of sharpening, but not too much. Probably something around 60 or 70, something like that. 70, yeah, 69 for example, that'd be fine. Okay, so now we took out the noise. So let's go back to the fit-in view to see the overall photo. Okay, now one little thing, if you take noise out and you go back into the fit-in view, the noise will be back. I think this is some sort of bug in Camera Raw. You also have that in Lightroom. But when I'm going to export the photo into Photoshop, which we will do in a second, you will see that the noise is actually gone. But when you still see it back when you click back to fit into view, so don't be surprised by this. That's how Camera works. Okay, let's go back into the basic panel, see if we can change a little bit. Let's see what happens if we put it a bit more to the right. Yeah, make it a bit more yellow. That's pretty cool. Let's see what happens if we put this a bit to the right, a bit more reds. Okay, now one thing you can also do to improve your colors is you can go into the fourth panel, which we haven't seen yet, which is the hue, saturation, and luminance panel. So what this does, let's take hue first. This panel, this tab opens 3 new tabs. Okay, now the hue tab basically changes colors, changes the look of your colors. For example, you've got reds, orange, yellows, greens, aqua, blue, purple, and magenta. If I take the reds and put the reds, you see here, the reds are a little bit purple, and here the reds are a little bit more red. So if I take and I go to the right, what's going to happen is going to take anything which is purple in the photo and turn it a bit more into red. Same thing here, orange. On the left it's very red and orange. Here it's a bit more yellow. See what happens if I go to the right. What it does, maybe not so much. What it does is it takes the orange and brings them and transforms them into a bit more yellow. Let's see a little preview before and after. See how the photo got a bit more yellow? The greens, there on the left side, the greens, they are a bit, yellowish, and on the right they are real greens. Let's see what happens if we can put back some real greens in this photo. Okay, let's check before and after. Before, after. No, that I don't like. Let's put it back to where it was. Or you can, just double click on the slider and it's going back to 0. Now aqua turns the green into the blues. Let's see what happens if we go to the right. Well, not much, because it's not that much green. Yeah, we can maybe do it a little bit. Doesn't do much. The blues gets the blues which are a bit turquoise and put them into a more magenta blue type of thing. See what happens if we go there. Okay. Purple. This turns the purple to the right more into purple, and to the left more into blue. I think I would go a bit more for blue. See what happens. You just check it out. You just turn this to the left or to the right, and click on the preview before and after. See if you like it. If you don't like it, just put the slider back at 0 by double clicking on it. Okay, that's pretty much all I'm going to do with the hues. Let's go into the saturation. Now the photo is pretty much saturated, so I don't think I'm going to go for more saturation. And okay, maybe the greens. See what happens if I boost the greens a little bit. Yeah, it's not so bad. It makes this a bit more green. The aqua a little bit more to the right, maybe. Okay, let's check it out before and after. Okay, no, I don't like that. I'm going to put this back to 0. Basically what this does is it saturates the color that's already in the photo. Let's say if I wanted to take some reds out, I could just put the reds. There's a lot of red here. Well, maybe not that much. Maybe it's orange. Let's put it back down to 0. Okay, look at this. When I put the orange down to 0, this whole part, which was very orange, is almost black and white. I don't like that, so I'm going to put this back. Let's see here. I wonder what this color is. Maybe magenta. See what happens if we go to the left. No, it doesn't do much. All right. And here, doesn't do much. Now, if you want to change a color and you don't know what it is, you can just click on this icon, which is called the Target Adjustment Tool. What this does is it turns your mouse pointer into a cross, and then you just can click on the color itself, and as you drag down, for example on saturation, it's going to try to desaturate that color. Check this out. I dragged it down and this is getting less magenta. Let's see before and after. See how this went less magenta? That's pretty cool. Maybe not that much. Let me put back a bit of magenta. So yeah, you can either use the sliders or you can use the Target Adjustment Tool, which is up here. Luminance is basically what color. It's going to take each color, the reds, and if you go to the left, it's going to make the reds, for example, darker. So they also become more saturated, because when you darken a color, it goes and gets more saturated. So that's pretty cool. And let's take the orange, for example, and let's lower a bit the orange, and let's lower a bit the yellow. It's going to make the sky a bit more intense. Not so bad. Not so bad. And on the other hand, if you go to the right, for example, if I take my reds to the right, it's going to make the reds brighter, which is not necessarily what I want for this photo. I like to have this sort of dramatic sunset. That was a bit the whole purpose of the story here. Okay, so that's a very important panel, a very important tab, the Hue, Saturation, Luminance. We call this HSL. All right, let's go back into the basic panel. I think I'm gonna increase the blacks back a bit more, because I like to have details in my shadows, but not that much. It looks a bit weird to have too much detail. This was shot against the sunshine, so it's a bit normal that there's a lot of shadows here, you know, and it makes the photo even more dramatic. So let's see where on the basic panel where we are from beginning to the end. A lot of change, lots of change. Okay, sometime I always sort of change my mind and take the temperature slider, for example, which is at 7,600, and put it the whole way to the blues. See what happens. Hey, not bad also, huh? Yeah, not so bad. I like this. Temperature is really a slider that's going to change completely the look of your photo, 100%. It really will change the look of your photo. Okay, let's see. I have to take an artistic decision. Do I go this way or do I go this way? Or somewhere in the middle? Probably around here. Okay. Let's see if we can boost the contrast to 100. Yeah, maybe boost the blacks a little bit more. I want to make these shadows a little darker. Makes the whole thing pop a bit more. Okay, that's not so bad. So now, before we open this photo in Photoshop, because we are finished developing the photo, a couple of more things we can do here. Let's go into the lens correction panel, and here you have two tabs, profile and manual. Something I always do is click enable lens profile correction, see what happens. Yeah, it makes the photo a bit less distorted. What lens correction does is that what it does, it detects the type of lens I used at the time, which was a 28 to 135, and basically corrects, like has built-in profiles to correct the photo, and does it on a complete automated basis. So that's pretty cool. One last thing I want to do on this is and go into FX. FX, this is where you have something called post-crop vignetting. What this does is when you take this to the left, it's going to make a vignette. It's going to basically darken the whole photo around the corners. So maybe I'm going to lower a bit the, you know, what it does is that when you darken the corner of an image, it focuses the attention of the viewer in the center of the photo. Maybe it's a bit much, a bit less. And let's go back into the basic panel and maybe boost a little bit more the exposure, just slightly, so we can see a little bit more. Okay, we're starting to get something. Before, after. All right, so now I'm pretty much finished with that. Let me go back into the graduated filter tool, see what happens if I lower a little bit the exposure, see if that does something. No, what it does, it lowers the top of the photo, which is already very dark to me, so I don't want to do that. I would like to lower this part of the photo a bit more. So one thing you can do is use another tool for this, which works very similar to the filter. Oh, one thing I just realized. I have a color cast. I didn't see that before. You see here on color, there is orange. Let's see what happens if I put down the saturation down to 0. Yeah, that's better. Basically, I was adding, that's why I thought the photo is a bit too much orange. I was adding a color cast the whole time in the photo. This is something I had done from a previous time. Sometimes some of these old settings are back, and so I didn't want to add a color cast. So maybe now I can lower a bit the exposure, see what happens. Not so bad. Not so bad. Okay, let's go and take another tool, which is the adjustment brush. The way the adjustment brush works is exactly the same way than the graded filter. You have settings which are there, and they only, whatever you do here is only going to be applied on what you brush. So let's put the exposure at, let's click on the minus, which is going to put everything down to 0 except exposure, which is going to be like -1. And this, you have the size of your brush. Let's make it maybe a bit bigger. Feather, I always leave to 100. Flow, I always leave to 100. Density, I always leave to 100. Basically, flow and density is how much force, how much action of one of these things is going to be applied when you click. I like to go the whole way. I like just to change it here. Basically, what I want is to darken this part of the photo to get more of the sunshine here, more of the intense of the sunset. Okay, not so bad. If you think you did too much, it's completely non-destructive, so you can just go back and bring back a bit of exposure, or if you think it's not enough, you can just take the exposure down. You know, whatever you like. Something like that is not so bad. Okay. All right. You see, I go back and forth all the time between all these settings. So let me go back into the general settings by clicking on the hand here. And I think the photo is a bit too dark. Let's see if we can boost a bit the exposure, the overall exposure. Let's see if we can bring recovery. That's one slider we haven't done yet, which is basically getting back the highlights. It's going to get back details in the highlights. I like that. That's pretty cool. Let's look at the temperature again. I always change my temperature all the time to see what happens if I go here, see what happens if I go there. You know, I move it around all the time. And sometime I like this and I go take a coffee and I come back and I'm going to change it again. So, you know, at one point you have to decide. But, okay, I added a bit more purple in the photo, which I had taken out. I think it's a bit better. Let's take the blacks back maybe a little bit more. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so we are getting there. At one point you have to stop in Camera Raw and get into Photoshop. So, okay, let's say that we are finished now. We did a lot of processing. Let's check it before and after. I still think this spot is too bright. So let's go back into the this tool here and see if we can lower the brightness, because I know I painted here. Let's select this and let's lower this even more. I want to make the sun more intense. Okay, that's better. That's starting to get somewhere. You see, it's very very powerful what you can do with Camera Raw, because you've got all this hidden information in the raw file that basically comes to life with using Camera Raw. Okay, so before we go into Photoshop, let's export this. So here you have the workflow options. This is what is going to be finally, once we have done all the developing, this is what's going to be the settings of your photo into Photoshop. So to start with, we have the space. You've got 4 space: Adobe RGB, Color Match RGB, ProPhoto RGB, sRGB. I advise you to always check ProPhoto RGB. It's the most quality one. That's the one being used in Lightroom. That's the biggest space. It's the best. Then you have depth. Now that's an interesting decision, because if you leave on 16 bits, your file is going to be twice big than 8 bits. So if you've got a fast computer and you want the best quality possible result, leave on 16 bit. Okay, then we've got the size. Now, size, you see here you have a little minus and here you have plus. You have the possibility to either lower the size of your photo as you come out of Camera Raw, or you can make it bigger. If I wanted to take a big poster of this, I would make it around here, make it the biggest possible. That's not the case. I just want to show you some of the settings in Camera Raw. So basically that's that. The last thing is open in Photoshop as a smart object. I don't want this for this photo because we are not going to go back into Camera Raw. We're going to finish this off in Photoshop. And this options gives you the ability to just double click in Photoshop and go back into the Camera Raw if you want to tweak the settings. Let's say that I'm done with it. So I leave this off. You will see in other projects we will use this option, but not here. So I click on OK. So now I'm ready to rock and roll. I just can click on Open Image and it's going to open up Photoshop. And it's going to open up Photoshop with all what we did, and it's going to take out the noise. You see, it's going to look a lot nicer now in Photoshop than it was in Camera Raw. If I click on, click on F to go into full screen mode. Hold on. Let me put my channels here. Okay, let's move my photo. I click on the space bar to move my photo close to the panel so you can see what I'm doing. Let me maybe make this a bit smaller, and let's move the photo even closer. Okay, now if I zoom in the photo, you will see the noise is gone. So that's pretty cool. So what am I going to do in Photoshop? This is where I do a bit of cropping. I think there's a bit too much space here. I think the sky here is very interesting, but here is a bit less interesting. So I take my crop tool and I put it around here, and I just lower the top to cut it off a bit here so we get more focus on the tree and on the sunset. Okay, let me put it back here. So that's cropping. Sometimes if you don't like your cropping, you can just press on Command Z to see before and after. Before and after. Maybe I cropped a little too much. So let's go back and let's be a bit more reasonable. Let's crop a little less. Let's give a bit more space to that tree. Something like that I think is a bit better. Okay, the last thing I would do on this photo is I wanna make some dodge and burn. What's dodge and burn? Dodge and burn is basically what I call local luminosity. You're gonna cheat a little bit and you're gonna brighten certain part of the photo and you're gonna darken certain part of the photo. And you do this to direct the eyes, because the eyes is automatically gonna go to the lightest part of the photo. So the way you do that is you create a blank layer, which you put into an overlay mode. Okay, what that does is when you're in overlay mode and you take a brush, here is the brush. Okay, now you need to make sure that your colors is the default colors, which is black and white, and it's not the case here. If it's not the default colors, you press D for default. And now the black is the foreground color and the white is the background color. Now I want the foreground color to be white. So for this, I can click on this little icon that says switch foreground and background colors, or you see there's a little X there. So if you press X, it does it for you. So I want it to be white. Let me zoom in the photo, press B to get the brush back. Okay, to lower the size of my brush, what I do now with Photoshop CS5 is I press on Control and Alt, and I can just drag with the left button to the left of my mouse. It's going to make it smaller, or to the right, make it bigger. So, okay, let's make it a bit this size, and space bar to move around the photo. And I'm going to put the opacity of my brush. I leave the flow at 100, but the opacity I'm going to put around 20. Because if I leave it at 100, it's going to make like really, really bright brush strokes, which is not something that I want. Now, I'm going to lighten up here a little bit, a little way here, so that it's guiding the eye into the sunset. Maybe bringing back a bit of details here and here, but not everywhere. Not everywhere. I just want the eyes to have some details on what's happening. Check it out, before and after, a big difference. Now usually I do several layers like this. This is a layer for the white color. I'm going to do another layer which is going to be also in overlay mode. I'm going to call this white, and I'm going to call this black. Now I'm just going to press X to have the black as my foreground color. And I want to see if I can get even more intense of the sky. So let me press B. So now I have a black brush and an opacity of 20. And let's see what happens if I paint a little bit here, just on the sun. Make this a bit more intense, because this is where the real deal is happening. This is where the sun is. Okay, so let's go back. Now, if you find that one of the things you did is too strong, like for example, if I find this to be too strong, the black, you can just lower the opacity. That's one way to go. Or you can check to put it in soft light. It's going to make it less saturated. I prefer to leave it in overlay and bring the opacity a bit down, maybe. Same thing on the white. If you think it's too strong what you did, you can just lower the opacity of the whole thing. I put it down to 64. Still makes a difference. Okay, one last thing I like to do on a photo is I like to boost the contrast, I like to boost the clarity, make it a bit more sharp, the sharpness of the photo. So there is two ways to go about it. First, I want to create a layer that's going to take into account all we've done so far. So for this, I press, watch this is a bit complex. I press Command, Alt, Shift, E. That's a lot of keystroke. What this does when you press Command, Alt, Shift, E, it creates a top layer taking everything we have done so far. And so I'll show you then two ways to sharpen, which I like. I either go into Filter, Sharpen, Smart Sharpen. Why Smart Sharpen? Because it's the smartest, it's the latest, it's the hottest, it's the smartest sharpening there is in Photoshop. I usually put the radius around 1 and the amount between 100 and 150. And here you have a little preview of before and after. Actually, it makes quite a difference before and after. So you can click on OK, and you only can really tell when you zoom in a bit. And let me do it before and after, before and after. Okay, that's the first way I like to sharpen. The second way I like to sharpen is, let me take this off and create a new layer that's taking into, let's call this smart sharpening. Smart sharpen. Okay. Well, I made a typo there, but that's okay. So Command Alt Shift E to create a new. So if it didn't work, make sure you're on the last active layer. Let's try that again. Command Alt Shift E. Okay, here we have it. Now the other way I like to sharpen is a little trick. You go into Filter, Other, High Pass. I usually go for between 2 and 3 on this one. I'm going to go around 2. And what this does, it makes a grayscale of your image where you only see the borders, the biggest lines in the image. And all you have to do is put this in overlay mode or soft light. Let me put it in overlay. And I like the sharpening that it does. Check it out, before and after. I kind of like it, makes a bit less grainy type of sharpening. Kind of like that. Okay, so basically that's where we are. We started off here in Photoshop. Let me press Alt. This is where we started and this is where we are. Not much of a change, it's little tweaks, but I like the final photo. Thank you for following me on this first Photoshop landscape project.